Imagine sitting in a cold lawyer's office while your own family laughs at you before the will is even read. The mahogany desk is polished so bright it looks like a dark mirror, and every piece of furniture in this room costs more than you have earned in the last 3 years. You know exactly how much that is, because you've been living out of your car for that entire time. Michael is sitting there in a suit that probably cost as much as your old Honda Civic, and Skylar has her hand on his arm while they both grin like they already won. They aren't worried about your future because they are too busy planning how to spend their new fortune. The lawyer doesn't even look sorry when he slides a single brass key across the desk toward you. "This is all that was left for you," he says, his voice flat and uninterested. Michael leans back with a smug smile while Skylar whispers something to him, making sure her voice is just loud enough for everyone in the room to hear the insult. It turns out your entire inheritance is a 20 by 20 concrete slab in the middle of nowhere. It is just a piece of cracked concrete sitting on a patch of empty land with no buildings, no structures, and nothing but weeds pushing through the fractures. While Michael walked away with the family house and Skylar took an investment portfolio worth $5 million, you were handed a foundation that nobody else wanted. You stood there holding that heavy key and felt the weight of their betrayal. But something about the cold metal in your hand told you this wasn't the end of the story. You start the long drive out there the very next day, traveling 2 hours outside the city down roads that turn into nothing but dirt and scrubland. Your Civic is starting to overheat again as you check your bank balance to see exactly $14 left in your account. The GPS signal dies when you are still half a mile away, but you can see the destination sitting alone on the horizon. It looks like a total waste of time, just a slab of concrete cracked down the middle as if something underneath was trying to push its way out. Bird droppings cover the corners and weeds grow thick in every fissure, making it the kind of place a normal person would never look at twice. Since you have nowhere else to go, you park your car right on top of it and prepare to spend the night on a piece of worthless stone. The air is freezing when you step out of the car, and your breath comes out in thick white clouds that vanish in the wind. When you stand on the slab, the concrete under your boots feels strangely warm, almost like something is breathing deep underground. That doesn't make any sense at all, so you start walking the perimeter to see if you missed a detail in the fading light. That is when you notice a small seam running along the edge, which makes it look like the concrete isn't actually sitting flat on the dirt. You brush away decades of filth in the far corner and find a small metal bolt sticking out of the surface. It isn't rusted or weathered like the rest of the property, but instead looks clean and intentional, positioned exactly where a lock should be. Your hands start shaking as you pull the brass key from your pocket and slide it into the hidden bolt. It fits perfectly and turns with a heavy click that echoes across the empty field. A deep grinding sound follows, like old machinery waking up from a long sleep, and the entire slab shifts just enough to reveal a gap. You look down and see a metal staircase descending into the darkness, realizing your family didn't give you nothing. They gave you the one secret they spent decades trying to keep buried. You lean into the edge of that concrete slab and give it a shove. It looks like a solid, immovable weight, but the moment you push, something clicks. The entire heavy mass begins to rise like a giant trapdoor, moving with a slow and mechanical smoothness that tells you it's been waiting years for this exact moment. The air that rushes up to meet you is surprisingly cool and dry. It doesn't smell like a damp basement or a rotting cellar, but instead, it carries the scent of cold metal and something perfectly preserved. It feels like you've just cracked the seal on a massive time capsule that's been buried since before you were born. You pull out your phone and thumb on the flashlight to cut through the dark. The beam of light doesn't hit a dirt hole or a rough ladder, but instead reflects off a set of polished, stainless steel stairs. These aren't cheap emergency steps or something thrown together in a hurry, because they are professional, solid, and clearly built to last forever. Each step you take echoes against the walls as you descend further into the earth. The temperature drops with every foot you climb down, and soon your breath is visible in the flashlight beam again. By the time you reach the midpoint, you realize this wasn't some construction accident or a basement the builders forgot to fill in. This was intentional, and every inch of it was carefully engineered. At the bottom of the stairs, you find a small landing and a heavy, sealed metal door. There is another lock waiting for you there, and when you slide the same key into the hole, it turns without a single catch. The door swings open on silent hinges, and you step inside. Your eyes take a second to adjust to the dimness. Light is actually filtering down from above, but it isn't coming from the door you just opened. It's shining through what you thought was just cracked, useless concrete on the surface. It turns out those cracks were a disguise for reinforced glass, meaning the skylights were hidden under a thin layer of dirt and rubble the whole time. You find yourself standing in a finished hallway where the air feels fresh and clean. Climate control systems hum quietly through vents in the ceiling, and several doors lead off into rooms that are still shrouded in shadows. You take a few more steps forward, and that is when your breath catches in your throat. Before you is a full living space that doesn't feel like a bunker or a cold survival shelter. It is an actual home built entirely underground, complete with polished concrete floors that shimmer in the soft light. The kitchen features stainless steel appliances that look like they belong in a high-end showroom, and the living area has custom shelving carved directly into the structural walls. Everything is covered in a fine layer of dust, but underneath that, the home is pristine. It's as if someone paused time down here and walked away, expecting to return at any moment. The walls are fully insulated, and the electrical work is tucked neatly into copper conduits. There is filtered air, a modern heating system, and even heated floors in the bathroom that speak to a level of luxury no one expected. In the bedroom, a king-size bed sits neatly made, looking like it's just waiting for a tired traveler to lay down. And then, tucked away in the back, you find the office. Blueprints are pinned to every inch of the walls, showing years of meticulous work. You see architectural drawings, structural diagrams, and engineering notes all covered in your grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. The dates on the bottom of the pages go all the way back to 1987, which means he spent 15 years planning and building this fortress in total secrecy. On the mahogany desk sits a leather journal with your grandfather's name embossed on the cover in gold leaf. Your hands are shaking as you reach out to open the cover. The very first entry is dated from the year the project started, and the words hit you like a physical weight. If you're reading this, they told you it was worthless, and they lied to your face. I built this place for someone who wasn't the loudest or the greediest person in the room. I built it for the one who was willing to stand on empty ground while everyone else was chasing gold-plated towers. I wanted the one who would finally understand that the greatest inheritance isn't what you can see, but what nobody else was smart enough to look for. You don't even try to stand up anymore, but instead, you just sink down onto the floor of that hidden office. And then, you start to read the truth. The journal entries cover 8 long years of work, and you can see your grandfather's handwriting change as the pages turn. It starts out frantic and rushed, but over time, the script becomes steadier and more certain. He didn't build this place out of paranoia, but because he was a brilliant structural engineer who saw the world differently than the rest of the family. He understood how foundations worked and why things eventually crumble, so he decided to build something that would actually last. He also understood exactly what kind of people his own family members had become. The entries lay out every single detail of the deception, including how he bought the land through a shell company so no one could track it. He brought in different contractors in short phases so no single person would know the scale of the project. The concrete slab on the surface was never a mistake, but a piece of camouflage designed to make the property look like a failed investment. But this was never just a house to him, because it was his way of protecting the future. He writes specifically about Michael and Skylar and how they mocked him for being obsessed with a dirt lot. He kept every single letter they ever sent him, including the ones where they begged him to sell the land so they could save him from his own mind. Those letters are all tucked away in a safe, serving as proof of their true intentions. He knew exactly who they were, and he made sure his plans accounted for their greed. The final entry is dated 1995, just 1 year before he passed away. He wrote that he wasn't leaving them a single thing they could fight over in court. Instead, he was leaving everything to the person who understood that true wealth is what remains hidden until someone brave enough looks underneath the surface. The person who found this would realize that he didn't really die, but he just went deeper into the world he created. As you keep reading, you find a small safe built into the wall behind a stack of blueprints.
Inside that safe is the real treasure. You find the original deeds to the mineral rights for the entire 500 acres of land above your head. This property sits on top of rare earth mineral deposits that mining companies spend billions of dollars trying to locate.
These rights alone are worth tens of millions of dollars, and they belong entirely to you. There are bonds from the 80s, various securities, and stacks of cash in different currencies. You find bank account numbers with the access codes written out in your grandfather's careful, precise hand. And then, you find a letter addressed specifically to you. He couldn't have known your name or which grandchild would eventually have the heart to come looking, but he wrote the letter anyway. He told you that you were reading those words because you were willing to see value where everyone else saw a wasteland. That choice made you different from the rest of the family, and it proved you were the only person who deserved to have it. You sit there in the silence of that underground office, surrounded by the evidence of your family's shame and your grandfather's genius. Your relatives thought this place was a joke, and they tried their best to keep you away from it so they could feel superior. They had no idea that your grandfather spent decades building a legacy they could never touch. Not because it was buried, but because they were too blinded by their own greed to see it. He left you that slab because he knew the vultures in the family would never look under a piece of trash. He knew you would be the one desperate enough to try, and he knew that desperation would be the very thing that taught you how to see what everyone else missed. The mineral rights are going to change your life forever, but the real inheritance is the message he left behind. It is the absolute proof that your grandfather saw right through them and made sure they would never get their hands on his life's work. You finally stand up and walk back up those stainless steel stairs just as the sun begins to set. The digital skylights in the ceiling begin to cycle through deep oranges and purples, which might have been your grandfather's last joke, or maybe it was just his final act of mercy. Standing on that cold concrete slab today, the world looks completely different than it did when you first arrived. The space isn't empty anymore because it feels full of the truth. And for the first time in a long time, you feel whole too. Your family laughed when that will was read, but those echoes sound different now that you know what they were hiding. They thought they were handing you a pile of nothing, but they actually gave you everything you needed to move forward. By trying to cast you out, they handed you the map to the very secrets they spent decades trying to bury under the dirt. This slab isn't worthless, and neither are you. That is the thing about secrets, because they never stay buried forever, and when they finally surface, they tell a story that no one can deny. Subscribe to see justice served in the next story.